Hello, and welcome to this Analyst Angle on innovative private 5G technology for distributed environments. I'm Bob Laliberte, Principal Analyst with theCUBE Research, and today I'm joined by Rajeev Shah, CEO and co-founder of Celona. And today we're going to discuss their latest technology and the impact it can have on global organizations looking to accelerate their private 5G deployments. Welcome, Rajeev.
Thank you, Bob. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a great talk. And we certainly have a lot to talk about today because you've just launched this innovative solution that really helps to simplify and accelerate the deployment of these distributed private 5G deployments called AerFlex, correct?
That's exactly right.
Awesome. So I'm looking forward to digging into this. So let's just get going. First, maybe talk a little bit about what it is and what prompted the creation of AerFlex and how it fits into your broader vision for the future of private 5G.
Yeah, look, I think we've got to start at the beginning. Why Celona? Why private 5G?
Yeah.
And our mission from day one has been we see these vast opportunities where people, things, and operations are still very disconnected.
Yeah.
And they're because traditional wireless technologies like Wi-Fi have not been sufficient for these very industrial environments. Think refineries, think highly industrial warehouses, think distribution centers, manufacturing plants, etc. And from day one, we recognize the potential of the private 5G technology to really bring connectivity, to bring secure connectivity to those environments. And so we recognize that if we want to do that, we have to identify every point of friction that is there when an enterprise tries to adopt it and knock it down. And we started in 2021, 22, when we first launched our product. It was an idea to say, what would a full stack enterprise friendly solution for cellular look like? And we have had great success deploying that in very large sites. But as customers started deploying this, they realized that they actually have need for similar connectivity in some sites that are relatively smaller. They're not really small, but they're still smaller, where you would typically only put one radio, maybe two radios at the most, and you still need that. And the traditional architecture required too much infrastructure to really do that at low cost, low friction. And that's where the idea of AerFlex was born from. And when you look back at the history of enterprise wireless, one of the most seminal things that happened in enterprise Wi-Fi was the birth of cloud Wi-Fi. Cloud Wi-Fi, once it came on, it was a tsunami, and then Wi-Fi was everywhere. Every
Yep.
enterprise, every business could at that point deploy Wi-Fi without the complexity of the old controller-based Wi-Fi. AerFlex is basically doing that for private 5G. At this point of time, we've made this accessible to businesses of all size, sites of all size, and it really makes it really a nice, simple, low infrastructure, low cost, low friction deployment model.
Okay, that sounds great. I mean, when you talk about going to a cellular environment over a Wi-Fi, obviously, I think a lot of people, they always relate that cellular piece to the large telcos and very complex environments. And so I thought you made a great analogy there talking about, hey, when Wi-Fi went to cloud-based, that's what we're doing with private 5G. Now, there's been other companies that have talked about cloud-based 5G as well. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more on your architecture and how what you're doing in particular simplifies the deployment for organizations and how it might be different from other cloud approaches today as well for private 5G.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the temptations people have when they try to cloudify anything is they effectively just create what I would call a hosted version. So in the telco speak, there is a necessary network element called the core, the 5G
Yeah.
core. And the easiest way to cloudify it is to, instead of running it on a server on the customer premises, run the entire core on the cloud. And you can say, hey, I have created a cloud-based solution. However, the fundamental problem with that is now you're sending all your traffic all the way to the cloud. And that is not a real cloud solution. If you think of cloud Wi-Fi, the analogy I drew, that's not what happens. What happens is that the access point is able to drop the traffic on the local traffic, let the local applications be accessed. There is no latency concerns. There are no security concerns. So when we wanted to build a true cloud hosted model, we said we're going to do it the right way. And this is where we have from day one believed that you need a single software stack that has been built all the way from the radio to the core to the operational and AI ops level, focused on private 5G. And that gave us this flexibility. So we were able to now build an architecture where we were able to take the data plane of the core and actually run it on our access points, right? And this was the design from day one. So we first 3 years back designed the hardware to have the capability to do this. We architected the software carefully in a cloud native way so we could port the data plane on it. And now the benefit the customer gets is just like cloud Wi-Fi. They can just plug in a 5G access point into their LAN, go to their cloud console, get the full control from the cloud, but all traffic is local. All security integration with existing security works just the way it always has. And they're able to get all the benefits of cellular with none of the complexity. And that's a very unique architecture. And honestly, nobody in the industry has done it. And even more interestingly, nobody quite honestly has a platform to build this on. Because you kind of have to think of this before you get to this capability when you're thinking of the architecture, as I said.
Yeah, that certainly is unique and differentiated. I've heard of organizations kind of doing that lift and shift method to the cloud. So it's hosted in the cloud and the core is up there. But one of the key tenets of having 5G was that you could separate out that control plane and the data plane. And it sounds like you've been able to leverage your engineering to really take advantage of that, to be able to deploy this environment, which enables you to deploy the APs in a very simplified manner, still retain control via a centralized cloud.
Exactly, exactly. And I think, one of the things, the DNA of this team is so deep rooted in enterprise networks that we take for granted critical things that we have done from day one that enable us now to take it to AerFlex as well. There are traditional telco architectures where even the radio is a whole half rack full of servers, dedicated cables and antennas and RUs and these things. So, we are sometimes I feel like I'm living in a different world than some of my competitors, and it's a good thing, but sometimes might be not so obvious to our customers and partners.
Yeah, well, and hopefully with this announcement, that's going to change some things. And hopefully we're going to be able to educate and inform more of those users about the opportunities that are presented, especially with this new release, which is all good. Um, One of the other things I want to talk to you mentioned a couple verticals to start with, but I'm wondering if you're starting to see, I'm assuming you've been talking about AerFlex with some of your customers in an alpha, beta, things like that. I wonder if you could talk about which one of your customers or the verticals are seeing the most interest in AerFlex. And within those, is there a specific use case where they really want to accelerate the adoption of that?
Yeah, I think there's been two key areas that I would say new environments have opened
Mm,
up thanks to AirFlex.
okay.
Number one is brand new verticals, and the biggest
Yeah.
one that stands out is retail and logistics in general.
Okay.
I think, and when you think of retail, don't just think of the consumer retail and department stores, but think of all the industrial retail that happens.
Yeah.
There are all these tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of retail stores around the country that are the extension of these industrial manufacturing customers who are selling you things like, I mean, fire equipment and pipes and
Hmm.
connectors stuff, and they need to be there, and they have these huge yards and they need connectivity, and they have been underserved forever. So I think that retail and logistics as a vertical has really opened up thanks to AirFlex. And I think it's also, you know, it's a vertical that kind of has been looking at private 5G to say, how can I best use this great radio technology, but has always struggled because of the cost and complexity that comes with all that infrastructure. So this really opens this up. The second has been in existing verticals like manufacturing, like petrochemicals, like oil and gas. We have opened up a different part of those customers. They have usually done it in their big plants and big
Hmm.
refineries. And now suddenly they can take it to their retail locations. They can take it to their smaller distribution centers. They can take it potentially upstream where there is these drilling areas where they might just need one radio potentially connected back through a satellite backhaul.
Hmm.
And all of these use cases have suddenly just opened up because now AerFlex is super light on infrastructure, super easy to plug and play. And so I think both of those have happened at the same time. There's a third that I would be quite remiss in not mentioning, but we have had now some general enterprise customers who are starting to say this is now so similar to cloud Wi-Fi, and this is so advantageous for quality of service and
Yeah.
security, lesser infrastructure, that they are starting to think of really complementing Wi-Fi with private 5G even in general office spaces.
Okay.
And so that's, this is where once you lower the friction, wireless capacity is one of those things that human beings seem to never get enough of. You lower the friction enough, people always find ways to use it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's true for any new technology that comes out. There's a learning curve and there's a comfort curve. We're seeing it now in AI and so forth, right? And how long people are taking to get comfortable using AI. I think we saw the same thing with private 5G. When it first came out, there was probably a little bit of reticence on those networking teams going, I don't know anything. That's the telco world, right? That's not my enterprise world.
Right.
But now, as you said, over the last several years, we're starting to see more and more of the technology getting deployed, people getting comfortable with it. And innovations like you're announcing is really going to help accelerate that curve as well for people being able to understand it looks a lot more like my Wi-Fi environment. It acts a little bit differently, which for good reason, right? The performance, the security, things like that. And so organizations, the more they get in and start using it, like I said, it sounds like a lot of your existing customers that have this technology in their big plants are now saying, hey, how do I distribute this across these other plants that I
Right.
have? And how do I do it in a cost effective and also in an efficient manner for my team so they can drive up that operational efficiency? And I think that's what it sounds like you've been able to do.
That's exactly right. I mean, a good concrete example, we have a customer who has been trialing this now for a few weeks and
Okay.
months, and they have to the order of 2,500 locations around the world.
Okay.
And each location would need anywhere on the lower end 2 access points, on the higher end, maybe 10 to 15 access points. And this really now opens it up for them, right? They were in the order of thinking, okay, let's do a few tens of sites because that's where we can afford to do this. And
Yeah.
now they're starting to say maybe we can do this in all 2,000 sites. And that just changes the productivity benefits that private 5G brings, how
Yeah.
far it can take it inside these organizations and how big a benefit it can provide. One of the hidden benefits out of that is, enterprises like standardization. And so when you are limiting to only the large sites, then you're not fully standardized as a technology. Now customers have the ability to say, this is my wireless technology of choice in all uncarpeted spaces in my environment, which in these industrial companies is 80% of their footprint. And that's, I think, the really exciting part here.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. And I think that sounds like a follow-up video with that customer after they've had some time to roll this out, because I'd love to understand their experiences and the value that they've been able to achieve by rolling out private 5G to a lot more of their sites.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's
Okay.
something that they've been very keen on. It's also interesting to see some of these customers understand the value of sharing their stories with the industry
Yeah.
because they know that they are proving to be the leaders and
Yeah.
people are going to look up to them and learn. So that's certainly what we should do as soon as this is in the scale and they're ready to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Those peer-to-peer reviews are so important for other ones to understand, okay, if they can do it, I can do it as well. I do want to push down a little bit on some of the challenges that organizations might be thinking about. So it's great that you can do the local traffic breakout and cloud-based control, but I'm wondering, how now that things are being distributed across the globe, there's obviously concerns around data sovereignty and things like that, especially for sensitive information across industrial or other regulated environments. How are you addressing those concerns for organizations with this?
Look, number one is that was one of the many drivers why it was mandatory that in any cloud architecture, the data plane had to stay local.
Yeah,
You cannot actually have the traffic leave the premises. That is an absolute non-starter in today's world, whether it's for, like you said, data sovereignty reasons, security reasons, privacy reasons. That is an absolute no-no. So by having the data stay local, you've actually addressed a majority of those concerns right out of the gate. And at that point, AerFlex is no different than any traditional private 5G architecture with an appliance or a set of appliances on-prem. So that's number
okay.
one.
Yeah,
Number two is independent of AirFlex, we have been spending a lot of our time, energy, and dollars to ensure that we meet the stringent requirements of the customers. We've gone through stringent pen tests. We are SOC 2 certified. We have multiple locations of our cloud in different parts of the world. So we have customers in specific countries that have very specific regulations that require all cloud data also to stay within their country. And so we have created a very, very unique architecture to be able to do that. And it is, one of the things that I like to say is if you are a company that wants to play in the large industrial enterprise, then you've got to be willing to invest in R&D to meet all these requirements. And so I'm very proud to say that over the last 18 months, these customers have told us what's required. We have responded, and we now, when we get things like RFPs and checklists, we are invariably 100% compliant in that full list across security, ongoing privacy checks, data sovereignty on all parts of our architecture. And it is one of our great strengths. In fact, that might be one of the top three reasons why our customers pick Celona over even some of our significantly larger competitors.
awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's super important in this day and age to have that security. Obviously, the data sovereignty is so important as well. So I'm glad to hear that you've made the investment into providing that for your customers. Another area I wanted to touch upon, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, when I was looking at your APs, you support both LTE and 5G in the same APs. And I know from talking to a lot of customers, people always say, who's deploying private 5G? And I said, well, you can always start with the people that have private 4G and look at those environments first. However, for a lot of those organizations, it's a bit of a strain to switch out from make that right, all the SIM cards and everything else that they have to switch out. I know you have both supported in your AP, so I'm wondering if you could touch upon and let the viewers know, how critical is that dual mode capability for a lot of these customers who are adopting, especially now at the edge, and how does that reduce that upgrade complexity? I'm wondering if anyone you've talked to said, so you can deploy this and start it off on 4G and then migrate to 5G when I'm ready.
That's exactly right. Look, I think, again, this is where the team's enterprise DNA really shows. So when we were building our 5G access points in 21, we had just launched our 4G products and customers were starting to deploy those. And the first question that we asked ourselves is, hey, in all our previous lives, when the first Wi-Fi, I don't know, 6 AP comes up, we have always assumed it will have backwards compatibility. But that doesn't work like that in cellular. If I release a 5G radio, that chipset does not support 4G.
Right.
And we said, I'm thinking of this from a customer perspective. This makes zero sense. How am I going to magically just migrate all of my devices one fine day from 4G to 5G? I just can't do that. And so we basically decided that we should build this 4G plus 5G architecture in one radio to overcome what is an inherent characteristic of cellular small cell chipsets where they don't do that. And so that's where the AP20 has both
Yeah.
radios in it. It gives customers the seamless paths to migrate when they need to without going back and changing their hardware in the ceiling. And I hate to keep saying the same thing, but there are two things that I think have stuck in our minds from day one. Number one, you've got to understand the enterprise customer. You cannot
Mhm.
approach this market with a telco mindset. And the second is when you do that, you need to have control over the full stack to be able to solve real customer problems at every layer. And the AP20 with converged 4G and 5G is a great example of that. Everybody else who was just taking existing radio products that were built for the telco and service provider market would completely miss that and therefore not have the ability to deliver this. So to me, whether it's AerFlex that we are excited to launch today or AP20 that we launched 3 years back,
Yeah.
these are all things that, I just go back to, comes down to the team, comes down to focus, and we are just focused on one thing. We
Yeah.
want enterprise customers to have the least friction to get all the benefits of cellular in their environment.
No, that sounds good. So they can take advantage of both AirFlex and the AP20s that maybe they've already got deployed, and then be able to leverage
Absolutely.
that with the new operating system, the operating architecture. Um, so we've talked a lot about what this means for the end users. I'm wondering if we could touch upon what it means, what AerFlex means for your partner ecosystem. Um, how will the system integrators and VARs, what's their role going to be in enabling these simplified deployments and so forth using AirFlex?
Look, number one, all our partners tell us the same thing, which is we want the market to get bigger. We want this technology to be adopted, to be available to a broader set of customers and use cases. And going to my very first point, the biggest thing AirFlex does is it opens up a whole new set of use cases and customers that our partners can go. And I think our partners have repeatedly given us feedback that that's very exciting to them. I mean, I'll tell you that we first briefed some of our close partners on AirFlex nearly 6 to 7 months back. And this might be the number one roadmap feature that they have been banging on our door to say, how soon can you get this out? And it has led to these partners just having such a pipeline of opportunities that's waiting on this because they said this is the requirement before we can really go talk to these customers about solving problems in these. So I think the partners are very excited. I think it's a big market expander for them. I think it is a further validation for partners who have realized why they're partnering with Celona. And this is further proof that this gives them a differentiated solution that the customers are going to like. And I think one of the things that we notice is really good partners understand that their value goes beyond just integrating different private 5G components. Their real value is to help the customer deliver the business outcomes they wanted on top of this. And so some of our best partners are really focused on that. They might be actually driving the automation initiative in a warehouse. They might be actually involved at a connected worker level to say, how are we going to get all your workers on their tablets, connected, more productive, rather than stopping at, we're just going to go deploy some networks. And so I think this further increases their ability to focus on the higher value add and really, really drive these business outcomes for their customers.
Oh, that sounds good. Sounds like a great opportunity for all of your partners that are out there with this new launch. So I know this has been a great conversation. I know we're running short. So last question for you. When you're thinking about the future and what that holds, do you see the AirFlex architecture becoming the default model for private 5G, especially as a lot of the AI and edge workloads start to grow even more?
I do. I think what I'm noticing in the market is there's going to be two sets of requirements that drive the need for some additional hardware, which is going to be not AirFlex. Number one, I think there's going to be places where there's going to be high-speed mobility, like think really high-speed robotics and autonomous robots, vehicles.
Yep.
I think the ability to anchor that mobility right there inside the premises at a latency sensitive level is going to be
Yep.
important. And I think that's a trend, especially in the really large sites. The second is we are seeing an increasing wave of edge inference AI requirements. And I think there are a lot of the environments where there is a drive to really reduce the infrastructure footprint
Mhm.
and therefore have a converged compute footprint that can do these edge AI applications anyways. And so we see an opportunity for potentially our edge to be able to host some of those as well. And so the
Okay.
reason for deploying our edge compute might not be our code, but might actually be these inference models that we want to run locally. So I think those are two areas where I expect we will do a non-AerFlex architecture, but everywhere else by default, I expect it will be AerFlex.
Got it. Got it. No, those make perfect sense, especially for those low latency, real-time insights that are required. This
Exactly.
has been a great conversation. It's awesome to see how the innovation is enabling private 5G to get rolled out to not just everything on one site and having to run it like you're a mini telco, and be able to evolve that architecture so it's more like the Wi-Fi that they're used to with that distributed control plane and data plane and so forth. So really glad to see that happening, and really looking forward to following up with your customers and finding out how they're able to take advantage of this and really deliver value to their businesses. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. So Rajeev, I really want to thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah, you are very welcome. And I want to thank all of you for watching this Analyst Angle on Celona's AerFlex, an innovative private 5G solution to accelerate deployments and simplify operations in highly distributed environments. For more details on this or other Celona solutions, please visit the Celona website.